Great steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. Therefore I will hope in him.
Hello, welcome to our Bible study. My name is Clint McElroy. Today we'll be in 2 Samuel chapter 10. We will be meeting today at 10 a.m., so please join us if you can. Hope to see you there. Masks will be available at the door for anyone who needs one. If you're sick in any way, please don't come to the auditorium, but instead stay home and enjoy the streaming service. We'll also be meeting at 9 a.m. for classes, so please join us for those if you can. You're welcome to join us in the auditorium to watch this class on the large screen there. We also want everyone to know we have these English Standard Versions available to anyone who'd care to have one. If you'd care to have one, please contact our church office and we'll make them available to you. We have many sick, and you should refer to the bulletin for more information, but we do want to keep in mind several that are on the list. These include Jeanette and Ron Inman, Paul Duke, Betty Smith, Marianne Kinsey, James Howard, Emma Richardson, April Askew, and Donnie Glenn Dixon. There are many others who are sick. I have been sick, and I thank you for your prayers in my regard. Many others have been sick as well, and we hope that everyone's feeling better. The Omicron variant seems to be much more mild in its symptoms, but some have suffered greatly, and we are very concerned for them and their health, and we want to encourage them, wish them well, and let them know that they are in our prayers. As is our custom, we want to remember the story of the two men on the road to Emmaus who were joined by a third man on the way. That man turned out to be Jesus, and after he left their party, those men remembered that there had been a burning in their hearts while he was with them. It's that burning in their hearts that we hope to kindle in our own hearts by drawing closer to the Lord through a study of his word. We also want to remember the admonitions of Leviticus chapter 19, to be holy for the Lord our God is holy. We go to his word to study and find out what holiness means, what it means to be set aside in service to the Lord. And finally, we want to remember the admonitions of the stories of Rehoboam, Jeroboam, and the prophet that came to Jeroboam. Rehoboam listened to the wisdom of man rather than the wisdom of God, and it cost him the kingdom. Jeroboam was the recipient of the northern kingdom after the kingdom divided, and that was done at the will of the Lord. The Lord had told him in prophecy that he would receive that once the kingdom split. He'd been told that while Solomon was still on the throne. He lived in exile in Egypt until the time of Solomon's death, and when he returned, he indeed took over the northern kingdom. But he didn't listen to the admonition of the Lord. Instead of doing what God had advised him to do when he took over the northern kingdom, which was to obey him, he raised up high places in the mountains and told the people to worship there and set up a false priesthood to facilitate that. And these things stayed in Israel long after his death and were an abomination before the Lord and a sin counted against Israel from that time until the time of Christ. It's a terrible thing that Jeroboam did. But God didn't just let him do it. He told a prophet from Judah to go up there and tell him not to do these things. He gave that prophet some other instructions, and that prophet went and did exactly what the Lord told him to do. He told Jeroboam not to do these things. Jeroboam ignored him, did those things anyway. But as that prophet went home, having done everything else he was told to do, he was met in the way by a prophet from Israel who wanted the honor of his company for a meal. He told the prophet from Judah that God had told him that the prophet from Judah should join him for that meal, which was a lie. That sounded good to the prophet from Judah. He didn't know it was a lie, so he went and followed that prophet from Israel, and that was wrong. The Lord required the life of the prophet of Judah because he had disobeyed his instruction. And that's a terrible story. It's a hard story to come to terms with as one who wants to bring the word of God to those who haven't heard it, or perhaps those who've heard it but want to ignore it. We have an obligation to stay true to what the message is that God has delivered. We can't preach our own message. If we do, we've done a terrible thing. We've done the same thing that Jeroboam did. We have an obligation to teach the message that the Lord has delivered to us. And as hearers, we have an obligation to listen for messages that are in alignment with the message that God has already delivered to us. And how can we do that if we don't know the message that God has already delivered to us? We study so that we can know that message, so that when we hear a message that might be from the Lord, we can know if it is indeed from the Lord. Because if it is from the Lord, it will be in alignment with all those things that the Lord has already told us. So I hope you'll join me as we enter into this study of 2 Samuel chapter 10. It's almost identical to 1 Chronicles chapter 19. So you may want to go and read 1 Chronicles chapter 19 to see how it compares to 2 Samuel chapter 10. Before we go on into the reading, I just want to take a moment and thank the crew in the booth for taking care of the functions back there in my absence for so many weeks. We are very truly blessed to have so many willing to come back there, learn the procedures that are quite tedious and aggravating at times, so that we can do the things in the booth that are necessary for the congregational worship and also the streaming service that we've taken on, which I believe is a blessing to the congregation. So I hope that you will give a word of encouragement to all those that are engaged in those functions, and especially Gary Payton, who labors extensively, well beyond the efforts of anyone else in the booth, to try to make sure that the technical function is there for all the things that we want to do. He labors endlessly, many hours spent trying to chase down problems that we have and fix hardware issues that come up. It is a great blessing to the congregation, the works that he's been engaged in. So thank you, Gary. Thank you, everyone back there in the booth. I hope it's a blessing to you, the hearer. 2 Samuel chapter 10 from the English Standard Version. After this, the king of the Ammonites died, and Hanun his son reigned in his place. And David said, I will deal loyally with Hanun the son of Nahash, as his father dealt loyally with me. So David sent by his servants to console him concerning his father. And David's servants came into the land of the Ammonites. But the princes of the Ammonites said to Hanun their lord, Do you think, because David has sent comforters to you, that he is honoring your father? Has not David sent his servants to you to search the city and to spy it out and to overthrow it? So Hanun took David's servants and shaved off half the beard of each, and cut off their garments in the middle at their hips, and sent them away. When it was told David, he sent to meet them, for the men were greatly ashamed. And the king said, Remain at Jericho until your beards have grown, and then return. Verse 6. When the Ammonites saw that they had become a stench to David, the Ammonites sent and hired the Syrians of Beth-rehob and the Syrians of Zobah, 20,000 foot soldiers, and the king of Maacah with 1,000 men, and the men of Tob 12,000 men. And when David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the host of the mighty men, and the Ammonites came out and drew up in battle array at the entrance of the gate. And the Syrians of Zobah and of Rehob and the men of Tob and Maacah were by themselves in the open country. Verse 9. When Joab saw that the battle was set against him both in front and in the rear, he chose some of the best men of Israel and arrayed them against the Syrians. The rest of his men he put in charge of Abishai his brother, and he arrayed them against the Ammonites. And he said, If the Syrians are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come and help you. Be of good courage, and let us be courageous for our people and for the cities of our God, and may the Lord do what seems good to him. So Joab and the people who were with him drew near to battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. And when the Ammonites saw that the Syrians fled, they likewise fled before Abishai and entered the city. Then Joab returned from fighting against the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem. Verse 15. But when the Syrians saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they gathered themselves together. And Hadadezer sent and brought out the Syrians who were beyond the Euphrates. They came to Helam with Sobach, the commander of the army of Hadadezer, at their head. And when it was told to David, he gathered all Israel together and crossed the Jordan and came to Helam. The Syrians arrayed themselves against David and fought with him. Verse 18. And the Syrians fled before Israel, And David killed of the Syrians the men of 700 chariots and 40,000 horsemen, and wounded Sobach the commander of their army, so that he died there. And when all of the kings who were servants of Hadadezer saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and became subject to them. So the Syrians were afraid to save the Ammonites anymore. Okay, so last time we read the story of Mephibosheth out of chapter 9, which started, and David said, "Is there anyone left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" And it says that there was a servant of the house of Saul who was named Ziba, and he came to David and said, "There is still a son of Jonathan who is crippled in his feet." And David asked, "Where is he?" And Ziba responds, "He's in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, at Lodabar." And they sent for Mephibosheth, and Mephibosheth comes to David and falls on his face and pays homage. And David says, "Mephibosheth?" And he answered, "Behold, I am your servant." In verse 6. And David said to him, "Don't fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan, and I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always." And he paid homage and said, "What is your servant that you should show regard for a dead dog such as I?" So Mephibosheth seemed to understand his state, that he was above all men the most regretful. He was a man of the household of Saul who was no longer king and no longer allowed to be king. Most times in history when this kind of situation arises, the descendants of such people are slaughtered or imprisoned so that they might not present themselves to be a challenge to the new authority. But that's not what David had in mind. David wanted to honor the memory of Jonathan and the love that he had for the house of Saul in some way, and he sought a descendant of some member of the family that he could honor, and they found Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth had been hiding in this home. It's unclear as to what reward that family had for showing this kindness to Mephibosheth. Certainly they put themselves in some measure of peril. Traditionally they would have been harboring a fugitive, and that would have been a bad thing for them to do, be caught doing. It says in verse 9 that the king says to Ziba, "All that belongs to Saul and all his house I have given to your master's grandson, and you and your sons and your servants shall till the land for him and shall bring in the produce, that your master's grandson may have bread to eat." So this was, I'm certain this was not great news to Ziba. So Ziba had been running the household of Saul in Saul's absence for some time, I would imagine, by this point. And he was reaping the benefit. The people who were servants in Saul's household were the only people receiving any benefit from that process. And now they were going to have to give all of that to this grandson of Saul, Mephibosheth. So that certainly was not the best of news, I'm certain. David continues that Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, shall always eat at my table. So his needs would have been very minimal, having been provided from the table of David, but everything that was part of Saul's property, family property, would now belong to Mephibosheth. It says that Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants, so there were quite a few people who were living off of the household of Saul. And Ziba said to the king, "According to all that my lord the king commands his servants, so will your servants do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons, and Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah. And all who lived in Ziba's house became Mephibosheth's servants. And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem and always ate at the king's table, and he was lame in both of his feet. So this is an incredible story of David's love for Jonathan, for the household of Saul, and now he was going to focus that love and that attention, that privilege, on Mephibosheth, who among men must have been most deserving of some kind of kindness because of the situation that he found himself in. So it's a wonderful story for Mephibosheth. It's a wonderful story for us because we are very much Mephibosheths in the kingdom of God. We are people who don't belong, who God has made a place for. And what a wonderful, wonderful blessing that is for those of us Gentile Christians to recognize that we have received. Going on into chapter 10, I've mentioned that I'm a little bit confused about the time frame of the events of chapter 10. And let me just say that because of the way it starts and some of the details of the story, I do believe this is a separate story from the events that are described in chapter 8, which are mainly to do with the Moabites, and here we're talking about the Ammonites. So I do believe these are different stories, and this is a different time. And indeed, it starts off after this, the king of the Ammonites died, and Hanun, his son, reigned in his place. So this is after the description of the events of chapter 8 and chapter 9. David said, I will deal loyally with Hanun, the son of Nahash, as his father dealt loyally with me. So David was returning what he had received. David always had this tendency to do as to others as had been done to him. So not quite the golden rule, but certainly a noble effort to make sure that he treated people in kind. So David sent his servants to console him concerning his father. David sent his servants to Hanun to console him, is what it's saying there. And David's servants came to the land of the Ammonites, but the princes of the Ammonites said to Hanun, don't trust David. Essentially, David has not sent these men to console you. He's not trying to truly comfort you. He's spying out your land so that he may take advantage and come and overthrow you. And Hanun listened to these people who were not good people to listen to for advice. If they had known anything about David, they would have known to at least give David a chance before actively engaging in anything against David. But instead, Hanun, it says in verse 4, took David's servants and shaved off half their beard of each. And I'm thinking that that was clearly like this way, half, not half this way. So to clearly distinguish and make clear that their beards had been cut, which was apparently a massive insult among the Israelites. And then he cut their garments from their hips down to expose their lower nether regions, which was certainly embarrassing to them and not appropriate. And sent them back to David. And when they were on their way, David heard that there had been something bad, so David sent men to meet them and told the men to remain in Jericho so that they would not be ashamed and embarrassed further within the bounds of Israel, and to grow their beards back out so that they could return without the shame of having exposed faces. So that's what apparently they did. In verse 6 it says the Ammonites saw that they had become a stench to David, so they realized that they'd made a mistake. And instead of going to him and apologizing, which would have been the easiest thing to do, they sent instead to the Syrians and said, hey, we need some help. So basically they were hiring Syrians as mercenaries to come and aid them in a potential fight against David and Israel. So they, of the Syrians of Zobah and Beth Rehob, 20,000 foot soldiers and 1,000 men from King Maacah, who was, I'm not sure, a Syrian, and 12,000 men of Tob. So there were Syrians of Beth Rehob and Syrians of Zobah, but it doesn't describe the men of the king of Maacah or the men of Tob as Syrians exactly. So they may or may not have been Syrians. And when David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the host of the mighty men. So all those men that had been described as mighty men of Israel were sent under the direction of Joab, and the Ammonites came out and drew up in battle array at the entrance of the gate. Now, I'm not clear on what gate to what city they're talking about, but I'm assuming this is a gate that belonged to the Ammonites and not the gates of Jericho or some city that belonged to Israel. So while the Ammonites were at the entrance to the gate, the Syrians and the men of Tob and Maacah were out in open country. Joab saw that he would have a fight, two-front fight, and that's not a good thing to find yourself in. Strategically, it's very difficult to fight a two-front battle. So Joab saw that this was the situation. He took the best men and set them against the Syrians, who were the better fighters. They were known to be mercenary fighters for many peoples, and they were known as very good fighters. The rest of the men were put in charge of Abishai his brother, and they arrayed themselves against the Ammonites at the gate. And then he said, if the Syrians are too strong for me, you'll come and help me. And if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come and help you. So that doesn't mean that he will fall back from his fight. It means he'll send part of his company back to help, and vice versa. So this was a way that they could strengthen one another in the fight should they be overwhelmed. And then this was an interesting statement. Be of good courage, and let us be courageous for our people and for the cities of our God, and may the Lord do what seems good to him. Maybe we all need a little bit more of that. Maybe we need to be more about doing what we can do and then saying, may the Lord do what is good to him. Let the Lord's will prevail here. Let's trust in the Lord. I look around the world today, and I'm sure you have too. There's some very unsettling things occurring throughout the world in all different manner of ways. There are terrible things happening in every capacity that you can imagine to classify something. No matter what thing you might come up with, it's pretty much bad stories. So maybe we should be less about trying to figure out the solution of those stories, do what we can do, and then let's put it up for the Lord. Let's trust in the Lord to take care of those things that we don't know about. We don't know how to resolve ourselves. So Joab and the people who were with him in verse 13 drew near to the battle against the Syrians, and the Syrians fled before him. And when the Ammonites saw that the Syrians fled, they likewise fled before Abishai and entered the city. So Joab returned from fighting against the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem. So they won. They won a fight where their enemies immediately retreated. So it doesn't really say how many people were killed in that exchange. So you can imagine that since they retreated so quickly, perhaps there were very few losses, which might help explain the following. So when the Syrians saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they gathered themselves together in verse 15, and Hadadezer set and brought out the Syrians who were beyond the Euphrates. So they enlarged their numbers to their total mass. They came to Helam at the end of verse 16 with Sobach, the commander of the army of Hadadezer, at their head. And when it was told to David, he gathered all Israel together and crossed the Jordan and came to Helam as well. The Syrians arrayed themselves against David and fought with him. And now we get the numbers. And the Syrians fled before Israel, and David killed of the Syrians the men of 700 chariots. Now we don't know about where those 700 chariots came from, because in chapter 8, they only left horses for 100 chariots. And 40,000 horsemen, which is more horsemen than they even said that there were people here. And wounded Sobach, the commander of the army, so that he died there. So they wounded the commander of the army of the Syrians. And when all the kings who were servants of Hadadezer saw that he had been defeated by Israel yet again, they made peace with Israel and became subject to them. So the Syrians were afraid to save the Ammonites anymore. So the Syrians had been defeated as a power in the region by the Israelites, who were not looked upon as being that mighty, and yet they trusted in the Lord and received his blessing. It's a powerful message for us. Let's trust in the Lord. Let's receive that blessing from trusting in the Lord. Things may not always go as we expect, and sometimes we might lose in part in order for the Lord to prevail in his will. And that should be fine with us as well. We should trust in the Lord that he will do what is best for us, as he has always done. In sending his Son to die for our sins, we have been preserved for eternity. That is a great blessing, and why would the Lord treat us like we were of no consequence? He won't do that. He will treat us with the care and the love that he's always treated us with. Let's trust in him. It's a great message. It's a great thing to take away from this passage. David was powerful not because of the might of his own army. He was powerful because he trusted in the Lord. He knew that the Lord would take care, and he put people in charge who believed the same thing. Joab and Abishai trusted in the Lord, and the Lord delivered them. It's a great story. Now, we're going to go on to chapter 11 next week. Chapter 11 and some of the materials there talk about things that are not necessarily the greatest things to have in the earshot of children. So please be forewarned that the mature material of the story of David and Bathsheba is coming up in our next study, Lord willing, of chapter 11 of 2 Samuel. I hope that you found a word of encouragement in today's lesson. We will be meeting today at 10 a.m., so please join us if you can. Hope to see you there. If you're sick in any way, please, again, don't come to the auditorium, but stay home instead and enjoy the streaming service there. God bless. Have a great week.
The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. Therefore I will hope in him.
My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God.
I will call upon the Lord.
I will call upon the Lord.
Who is worthy to be
Who
praised?
is worthy to be
So
praised?
shall I be saved from
Shall
my
I be
enemies.
saved from my enemies?
The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. Jesus Christ, he died for me.
Jesus Christ, he died for me.
And he took away my
And
sin.
he took away my sin.
I will live with him for eternity.
I know the Lord liveth,
And blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted.
I know the Lord liveth,
And blessed be the rock, and
be the Lord.
My salvation be exalted.
I know the Lord liveth,
And blessed be the
blessed be the
God of my salvation be exalted. The Lord liveth, and blessed be the
blessed be the
God of my salvation be exalted.
I will